Drew here, and I'm really sorry that I did not review episodes 2 and 3. No, you didn't miss them. YouTube didn't take them down. I just never got to it. I was having a baby. Please forgive me. But I'm here now, and I want to review episode 4 titled Boo. And I have to say, overall, so far, my feelings for season 4 have been a little less than the ones that I had for season 3. I enjoyed season 3 more than season 2, maybe not quite as much as season 1. I think it's really hard to match a season as excellent as season 1 in terms of compactness of storytelling. But I think that the issue I have with season 4 is that season 4, it has a lot of the stylistic excesses of season 3, but it doesn't have so far I have felt that the narrative has kind of moved in fits and starts. And I feel that the big issue is that a lot of the time there's a lot of false alarms or inconsequential events. This episode, for instance, Leanne goes on a hunt to try and find the cult members who she believes have moved in to a house on the street. And she goes trick-or-treating with this goal in mind, taking the dagger with her. And it was a little bit disappointing, actually, to me, that the dagger never got used. It was kind of a Chekhov's gun this episode, an element that you expect to just have importance and to end up being used by the end of the episode. And it didn't end up getting used. And it was just, as I said, a bunch of false alarms. Now, there were some interesting moments, and I loved the garish Halloween aspects of this episode. I loved all the costumes and getting to see Leanne being a goth queen. But again, it didn't really add up to a whole lot narratively. We didn't really learn anything new about Leanne. We didn't really learn anything new about any of the other characters, and the plot didn't really progress. Which isn't necessarily a problem. The show does this a lot. But the bigger issue, the thing that probably irked me more, was the denouement with Sean's character, which I think they've really played up the Leanne as God aspect this season more and more. I think, obviously they were a little bit on the nose in previous seasons, so it wasn't exactly subtle all the time, but I feel that this season they've played it up, if anything, more so. And I remember telling my wife partway through this episode, I think that this show is going to end with them rebelling against Leanne because she's the God stand-in. And before the episode was over, of course, Sean decides that he's on Dorothy's side and that he wants to get Leanne out of the house. He'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. But to me, the fact that he made this decision did not feel motivated in this episode, and I don't think that they did enough to build up to this in previous episodes. I feel like it kind of came out of nowhere. It was an about face that was rather unexpected. And, I think it would be understandable if they had shown him, bristling under Leanne's authority, or if they had shown him really, really struggling with isolation from Dorothy. But I feel like Dorothy and him have started to thaw a little bit in the last couple episodes. I saw signs that maybe she was willing to forgive him to some extent. But this episode, the only things that really happened were a couple conversations with Julian where maybe Sean hadn't really realized that he had picked a side up till now, but how could he not have? And how could this realization have so quickly made him jump back to the other side? Still knowing what he knows will happen if Leanne is forced from the house. I don't really understand. Maybe there's more to it. Maybe he has a plan that hasn't been revealed yet. But as it was, I felt like this seemed like a big leap forward for his character that hadn't had enough development. And I found that a little bit frustrating. Otherwise, though, like I said, I thought the Halloween aspects of this episode were quite fun. I thought a couple moments stood out. The moment where Leanne pulls the child into the house and tries to scare him. She's starting to really enjoy being fearful, as she points out at one point this episode, really enjoying the power that she has over people. And up till this point, I don't think that's really been the case. I think she's more or less used her power for good. And to protect herself and the Turners. But this episode, we see her using it multiple times just to frighten people for no particular reason, just because she can. And she's just relishing these opportunities. And then again, it was surprising to me, there were a couple moments this episode where there was a little bit of Hitchcockian suspense going on, or it seemed to be the case that there was, when they had these moments where you believed that Leanne thought that she was with Toby, and we know the audience have been let in on the fact that it's not Toby, and we're led to believe that it might be a hostile presence. But of course it turns out, again, to be a false alarm, but one that seems like it should have had more consequences than it did, considering Leanne broke this boy's arm in a very gruesome fashion. You would think that that would probably lead her to be put in jail. But otherwise, we had this great moment where Leanne takes this little girl and asks if she's frightened of her, and then uses her powers to cause the electricity to spark on the street and other frightening things to happen. So quite obviously she's taken a turn for the dark side. If she hadn't before, you could argue that she had done things in the past that were evil, but she usually had motivation for them. Now she's just doing whatever she feels like because it's fun. So she's gone even further down this path. So otherwise this episode, we didn't see as much of the other characters. It seems like another very Leanne heavy season. I think that the most interesting moment in the Turner household, besides Sean's fateful decision to try and wrest Leanne from the home, I think the moment when Dorothy realizes that she can't remember the first Halloween costume that Jericho wore, I thought that was really interesting. They're teasing the moment when she's going to finally realize that Jericho died and have to grapple with what's going on. But they've been teasing it a very long time, and these teases are starting to feel less impactful. But I thought this was a pretty good one because it was the first time where I think that Dorothy was actually actively thinking that something was wrong, as opposed to having this deja vu staring off into space moment. It was actually her actively thinking about the fact that something was off and not really knowing what the logical explanation for it was, other than blaming herself for being a bad mother. I enjoyed this episode, but I think this show, considering this is the last season, I would expect them to pick up the pace a bit in subsequent episodes. And I would have liked it if they'd just given a couple hints in the last couple episodes that Sean was maybe bristling under Leanne's authority. Anyway, let me know what you thought in the comments. If you're interested in seeing my upcoming reviews of Servant and other shows, please consider subscribing. And as always, thank you for watching.